Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is the first episode of my new series, Salesforce ScreenFlow Basics. I'm creating a playlist and these episodes are going to consist from, what is a ScreenFlow, how to, create a flow, all the way to more advanced techniques. So make sure to check out the playlist to see all the videos. But if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I'm putting out new Salesforce content each week. And let's jump into the first episode. All right, so I wanted to start off here with answering the definition of, what is a ScreenFlow. So all the links for everything is in the description of the video. This is from Salesforce admins. It's from the Salesforce site here, and they have the official definition. So a ScreenFlow is a flow type that requires user interaction as it includes screens, local actions, steps, choices, or dynamic choices. Your users can invoke a ScreenFlow from many distribution methods such as a Lightning page, Experience Builder pages, Lightning Well components, Aura components, custom buttons, actions, or links, and also flow orchestration, just to name a few. You can use a ScreenFlow to collect data or display data to users. And there's a bunch more useful information in this document, so make sure to check it out. The first thing I want to do is show you how to create a flow. Now, if you're not already logged into your Salesforce sandbox org, go ahead and get signed in. And if you don't know how to create a flow, what you're going to do is you need to be in setup. So to do that, in the top right, you're going to see the gear icon. You're going to select that, and you're going to select setup. Once this loads in here, you're going to be able to search for flows in Quick Find. And you can just type flow. And then right here under process automation, you will see flows. You're going to select that. Now this shows the current flows that I have in my org. Some pretty cool things about this page is you can actually set up different list views and filter. If you have a ton of flows in here, you can filter them by whatever you want. I have this list view pinned for all flows. Now we're going to go ahead and create a new flow. In the top right, you will see new flow. Now what is loading in here is what's called the flow builder. This is your interface for building any flow. Every time you go in to create a new flow, it's going to ask you what flow type you want to set up. Now, this video series is about ScreenFlows. So it is selected by default, and we're going to select that. But while we're here, I'm just going to show you some other options that are out there. Now, some of the other types of flows we have here are record triggered flows, platform event, record triggered orchestration, auto launch flow, no trigger, and scheduled triggered flows. You can also select all plus templates, and then that pulls up a bigger list that you can take a look at. But the core ones are these, and we're going to hit create to create our ScreenFlow. Now what you're looking at is the flow builder interface. Whenever you create a ScreenFlow, the start button here will say ScreenFlow. Now you're not able to add any requirements in here. Like if it was a record triggered flow, you can set in some entry requirements because the ScreenFlows typically are launched from a button on a Lightning page or platform events or different things like that. So you can't adjust these. They are launched via a button or some sort of user interaction typically. Now on the top left, there's this little icon here. It's called the toggle toolbox. When you select that, that opens it up and you're able to create new resources here. This is pretty crucial whenever you want to create different variables, formulas, constants, or even a text template. You can also create choices or choice set collections. Typically you're going to do that in your screen and they kind of are stored there, but there's many different options here as well. There's also a stage selection here to identify different phases in the flow to track users' progress if you want to do that. I'm going to close this out for now. Now the way you can add an element in is if you come over and hover, you will see this add element section. It looks like a plus sign. You have different elements that you can add in. Here is the screen. That is what is going to be displayed to the user. You can also do some sort of action. So perform an action outside the flow, like send an email or submit for approval. Or you could launch a subflow, which basically you call on another flow from this flow. These are the logic-based ones, so you can do an assignment. This is a decision element. So yes, no, loop, transform, collection sort, and collection filter. All these, when you hover over them, they will give you a description of what each one is. And then for data, you got create records, update, get, delete, and roll back records. Closing this out, you actually have an auto layout right here that is very useful. When you select this, you can actually change this to freeform. Now you won't be able to add elements to your flow the same way. You can see I click here and it won't let me add anything. If you come over and you click and drag, you can drag this up and you can get a little plus sign and you drop it. And this will add in that decision element into the screen. You would fill out the required info and it would be added to your screen flow. To show you, I'm gonna add in some dummy information here. I'm just gonna call this test. And then we need to put in a label. I'll call this test as well. And then I'm just gonna select some sort of resource here to make it populate. And then I'm gonna call this test 1. And there we go. So now you can see the element is added on to the canvas here. If you come up here and you click the circle, you're gonna get your little pathway icon and you connect the two and you drag and drop, but you can now move this wherever you want it. The difference between freeform and auto layout is that you can kind of add as many elements you want to on the screen and then connect them, or you can just stick with the auto layout and I'm gonna make it loose positions and it automatically adds in default outcome paths because you would have to add that in for yourself. But I'm going to delete these because we do not need them right now. And in the bottom left, which you might not be able to see here, so I'm gonna kind of move my screen around a little bit so you can see it because of my face down here. You have a minus sign here so you can zoom out or you can zoom in to the elements to get more room. You can also hit this fit to canvas as well. So if you have a ton of elements, you can hit this and you can make it fit the canvas. Now for episode 1, I'm just going to create a very simple screen just to show you how to create a screen and show you some of the different things you can add to it. So let's go ahead and do that. And I like the auto layout personally. It's really user's choice on this. So I'm gonna stick with the auto layout for me. So you can hit the plus sign, then screen. All right, so this is what it looks like the first time you open it up when you're creating a new screen. Now, you need to name your screen something. This will be the name whenever you're looking at your canvas, your layout that will display. I personally like to label it something that is relevant to how the flow is built. So if you are, like, you can name it something like user input, or you can name it, collect account information, whatever is relevant. I like that versus better than just saying like screen 1 or screen 2. We'll call this collect account information. And when you hit tab, it'll fill out the API name. As you can see, there's no spaces, so it puts in a underscore. And you can add a description of what the screen does as well, which is best practice, honestly. That way, someone that comes behind you can see exactly what you intended the flow to do. Now, you have a couple options here. You can configure the header and the footer. So I'm gonna hit the header. So you can show the header or not. You see flow label here. I just always turn this off because I end up putting my own headers typically. And then I'll collapse that section and let's look at the footer. So you can either choose to show the footer or not. So if there's no second screen, maybe you don't want that displayed. But I like displaying because I want the buttons. You're also, for like the next button, you can customize these. So you can call it next or finish, but the standard label is finish. You can use a custom label. Maybe you want to call it done. When you tap out of the box, it'll fill in your button for you, or you can just hide the button altogether. Same thing for the previous button. I'm going to hide it for our purposes, and there's actually a pause button, and you can do the same thing with it. I'm going to hide the pause button as well. Now you saw there's another option here. It says pause configuration message. You could use the standard message here, or you could use a custom message. So I'm going to hide that as well. Now that is your screen properties here, and you can click this little resize panel if you want that to be bigger, or you can collapse it down. Really, it's your choice. On the left side, we have the components. So you can think of these as different things you can add to your screen. So you can add an address component, a call script, checkbox group, different things like that. And then you have fields. So these are fields that are available on records. Now, the reason it's not really pulling in any information right now is because I don't have a record variable selected. So We'll get into this in future episodes, but whenever you launch a screen flow, you can pass a record ID to that flow. So if the button is sitting on a Lightning record page and you click the button, it could pass the record ID of that record to the flow and assign it to a record ID variable. And you could input that information here and you would have access to the fields that are on that record. Under components, we're going to add in a few different things. We're just going to look at some of the options and kind of put together a very basic screen. So earlier I said I don't like the headers, I like to add in my own. That is because there's a couple of display options. You have a section or you have a display text. If you click display text, it'll put it right here. It needs an API name, so I'll just call this display. It doesn't really matter what you call that. I am going to put in my own header. We're going to call this account info. Now what's great about using this is you can go in here and you can bold it, you can italicize it, underline if you want to, and even change the size. I'm going to also center it. I'll turn that italics off. I don't really like it. There we go. You can also set up the component visibility on this, but we'll cover that in a minute. Now, back over here, maybe you're wanting to collect some information from the user about an account, for example. So we want to collect the account name. So you can either scroll down and look for a text box. You can also search it and look for text. So you have a long text option and a text option. So I will pull both in so you can see both. So long text areas, you have more characters that can be entered, and the text box, you have less characters, but it's very similar purposes. I'm going to use a text box here because we're just collecting the account name. Now, for the label, we're going to call this enter account name. When you tab, it does the API name. Something that's very, crucial for data integrity is, making sure certain fields are filled out if you're creating new records or editing records. So having the required option is really nice here because if you're creating a new account or you're trying to find an account, you're going to need them to enter in data before you can save a record or go to the next screen. So when you select require, it will add the little red asterisk here, the little star, which is great. It's going to require them to enter an account name. You could also set up a default value if you want. We'll cover that more in future episodes with some of the projects we're going to be doing, building out more complex screen flows. You can also set up component visibility. You can validate the input with a resource picker here and an error message. And then this is the formula down here, but we will cover that later. And then there's more advanced things too. So use values from the last user last visited the screen or refresh to incorporate changes elsewhere in the flow. And we will cover that later. All right, so we got enter account name, and maybe we want to add in a date field. We can do that. There's date and time, and there's date. Two very different fields. So make sure you are adding the one you want to in. So maybe if you had a meeting with this account, you might want the date and time fields. But if you don't, maybe just using a date field would be more useful than using a date and time field. Same thing with the kind of like the enter account name field. You're going to add your label, API name, and you can also set up a default value. So enter, we can enter created date. And then the default value, you could set this up as well. And you can also mark it required and all that. There's a lot of different options in the component section here. We could even add in a currency field, and we could call this maybe gross income. And this also allows you to specify decimal places. I'm going to give it 2 decimal places. And yeah, we're going to actually hit done, and we're going to save this flow and run the debug on it. So we're going to hit save, and I'm going to call this test flow. And you can add a description here. There's also advanced options as well on how to run the flow. This is the type of flow that we set up, and then you could set up as a template if you would want to. This is the resource picker here for the interview label, but we're going to hit save. Oh, and as you can see, I already have a test flow already exists because I've been using this sandbox a lot for some of my videos. But we'll call this test flow 2. And we need to change the API name to give it something unique. And we hit save and boom, there we go. Now over here we have run, debug, activate, save as. We're going to go into the debugger. And we're going to hit debug. It opens up in a new window, which I really like that. It's very useful. Now, you have a few different options to run the flow. Right now, we can't run this as another user because it's a screen flow. So we're just going to go ahead and hit run because I want those options selected. And this is how it would look to the user minus the debug details over here. So as you can see, it's running the flow. Any records that the flow was all ready to create, update, or delete was committed to the database, which we didn't really do anything with that. But let's enter an account name. Call this test account. Created date. When you click here, it's going to give you the date option. And then gross income, you can start typing in a number. When you click out, it's going to format it into the currency field or currency format that you selected. And we selected 2 decimal places with that. Maybe you inputted 125.20, and there you go. Now, when I hit finish, it's not going to do anything. But you can see on the right side, this is some useful information. So it says account info. The text box, enter account name, label, and the value at runtime, it collected whatever I put in. Same thing for the value at runtime here, and then the value. So this is really good whenever you're going in and testing flows, because in the next episodes, we're going to be taking in user input and then doing saves or creating new records. And that would be the next step in the process. You would be able to see that on the right side. If there is an error with your flow, it will let you know. You can go through and see what the error message is. And oftentimes you can go through the debug log and figure out what happened. But I think that's going to be the end of episode 1 of this series. I hope you found this video useful, really just getting you started with screen flows. In the next episode, we're going to go into creating our first fully functioning screen flow. So make sure to check out the next episode in the series. There is a playlist that's been created for these videos, so make sure to check that out. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Make sure to leave it a like, and I will see you in the next one.